This is the second video all about percentages, and it emphasises the importance of being able to work out 10%. Not just to work out 10% of a number, but to calculate so many other percentages. So first of all, this is fundamental. You must remember this. To work out 10% of a number, all you need to do is divide by 10. Got to keep that in your head. You will use it so many times. So if we were to work out 10% of 120, we just do 120 and we divide it by 10. So the answer is 12. 10% of 120 would be 12. To work out 20%, we do not divide by 20. We use that building block of knowing what 10% is by dividing by 10. So if we are faced with 20% of 70, the first thing we do is we write down what 10% is. 10% would be 7. To work out 20%, well, that's twice as much. So we take our 7 and we times it by 2. So 20% of 70 would actually be 14. We can use the same skill for 30%. 30% of 120, say. First of all, fundamental building block. Here we go. What's 10%? 10% of 120, we divide by 10 and we get 12. To work out 30%, we take that number and we times it by 3 because it's 3 lots of 10%, and that would give us 36. So 30% of 120 would be 36. Same skill again for 40%. You've guessed it. First skill, work out 10%. 10% of 160 would be 16. To work out 40%, we're going to have to times that by 4. Now, along the way, you may be faced with certain sums where you have to do a little sum on the side, a little bit of a scratch pad on the side to work out the answer. So for this one, 16 times 4, not necessarily something you can do in your head. 6 times 4, 24, let's carry the 2. 1 times 4 is 4, add 2 is 6. So we get 64 as our answer. So we've used that building block of 10% to work out that 40% of 160 is 64. You can use the same method for 60, 70 and 80. Of course, we don't need to do that with 50 because we already know we just have to halve it. So this one would be 10% times 6. This one, 10% times 7. And this one, 10% times 8. There is an exception when you come to 90% where there is a quicker way of doing it. If you're faced with doing 90% of 200, it can be quite complicated to work out 10%, then be faced by timesing that by 9. You can easily make a mistake along the way as there are many stages. So a quick way to do it is to say, okay, let's work out 10%, which is pretty simple. It would just be 20, and then take it away from the 100% amount. This is effectively 100%. If you take away 10%, you're left with 90%. So 0 take 0 gives you 0. We can't do the next one. 10 take 2 is 8. And then 1 take nothing is 1. So by taking away 10%, we've worked out that 90% equals 180. A little bit of a shortcut.